You think life is chemistry, molecules bumping into each other, reactions happening when molecules have enough energy to overcome barriers, classical physics, balls rolling over hills. If the ball doesn't have enough energy to get over the hill, it rolls back. Simple. But life doesn't work that way. Life relies on something impossible in classical physics: quantum tunneling. Particles passing through energy barriers they shouldn't be able to cross. Electrons tunneling through barriers in photosynthesis. Protons tunneling in enzymes. Hydrogen atoms tunneling in DNA. Without quantum tunneling, none of this would work. Photosynthesis would fail, enzymes would be too slow, DNA would be too stable to mutate. Life, as we know it, would be impossible. I'm Leonard Susskind, and I've spent 50 years thinking about quantum mechanics. And I'm going to tell you why quantum tunneling, one of the strangest phenomena in physics, is essential for life. Not just useful, essential. Without it, you wouldn't exist. Let me start with what quantum tunneling is. In classical mechanics, particles have definite positions and energies. If a particle doesn't have enough energy to overcome a potential barrier, it can't get through. It's like trying to push a ball over a hill. If the ball doesn't have enough kinetic energy to reach the top, it rolls back down. It never gets to the other side. But in quantum mechanics, particles are described by wave functions. And wave functions don't have sharp boundaries. They're spread out. The wave function of a particle approaching a barrier doesn't just stop at the barrier, it penetrates into it, exponentially decaying but non-zero. And on the other side of the barrier, there's a non-zero amplitude, a probability that the particle appears on the other side. Even though classically it doesn't have enough energy, this is quantum tunneling. The particle tunnels through the barrier. It doesn't go over it. It doesn't break through it. It just appears on the other side, with some probability determined by the height and width of the barrier and the particle's energy. The probability of tunneling depends on the barrier. Thick barriers, high barriers, low tunneling probability. Thin barriers, low barriers, higher probability. The mathematical description involves the wave function exponentially decaying inside the barrier. The decay rate depends on the barrier height and the particle's mass. Light particles, like electrons, tunnel more easily than heavy particles, and the tunneling probability drops exponentially with barrier width. This is why tunneling is most important at small scales, atomic and molecular scales, where barriers are thin and particles are light. Electrons, protons, hydrogen atoms, these tunnel. Larger objects don't. Not because tunneling is forbidden for large objects, but because the probability becomes unimaginably small. A macroscopic object tunneling through a wall has a probability so low it would take longer than the age of the universe to happen once. But for electrons and protons in molecules, tunneling happens all the time, constantly, and life depends on it. Let me tell you about photosynthesis. This is the process where plants convert sunlight into chemical energy. Light hits a chlorophyll molecule. An electron is excited to a higher energy state. This electron needs to be transferred to another molecule quickly. Before it loses its energy as heat, the electron transfer must happen in picoseconds, trillionths of a second. If it's slower, the energy is wasted. The electron dissipates its energy and photosynthesis fails. Now, the electron faces an energy barrier. The gap between the donor molecule and the acceptor molecule, classically, the electron would need enough energy to jump this gap, but it doesn't always have that energy. Yet the transfer happens with near perfect efficiency. Over 95% of photons absorbed lead to electron transfer. How? Quantum tunneling. The electron tunnels through the energy barrier. It doesn't wait for thermal energy to push it over, it tunnels. And this happens incredibly fast, faster than any classical mechanism. This is why photosynthesis is so efficient. Without tunneling, electrons would get stuck, energy would dissipate. photosynthesis would fail. Plants wouldn't exist. No plants means no oxygen, no food chain, no complex life. Tunneling makes photosynthesis work, and photosynthesis makes life possible. Now let me talk about enzymes. Enzymes are biological catalysts. They speed up chemical reactions. In your body, enzymes catalyze thousands of reactions, breaking down food, synthesizing molecules, repairing DNA. Without enzymes, these reactions would be too slow. They take years or centuries to happen. With enzymes, they happen in milliseconds. How do enzymes work? They lower the activation energy of reactions. They stabilize the transition state. They bring reactants together in the right orientation. But there's more. Many enzymes rely on quantum tunneling, specifically proton tunneling and hydrogen tunneling. In many enzyme reactions, a hydrogen atom or proton needs to transfer from one molecule to another. This transfer involves crossing an energy barrier. Classically, the hydrogen would need thermal energy to overcome the barrier. But at body temperature, thermal energy is only about 0.025 electron volts. Many barriers are higher, much higher. Classically, the reaction would be too slow. But quantum mechanically, the hydrogen tunnels, it passes through the barrier, and the reaction proceeds at biologically relevant rates. This has been observed experimentally. Enzymes show temperature dependence that can't be explained classically. The reaction rate changes with temperature, but not as much as classical theory predicts, because tunneling doesn't depend strongly on temperature. It depends on the barrier shape, and enzymes are evolved to create barrier shapes that maximize tunneling. They're quantum machines, optimized by evolution to exploit tunneling. Let me give you a specific example. Alcohol dehydrogenase. This enzyme breaks down alcohol in your liver. It transfers a hydrogen atom from ethanol to a cofactor called NAD+. The hydrogen tunnels. Experiments show that deuterium, heavy hydrogen with an extra neutron, is transferred more slowly. This is the kinetic isotope effect. Heavier particles tunnel less efficiently. The reaction rate changes by a factor larger than classical chemistry predicts. This is evidence of tunneling. Many other enzymes show similar effects. Lipoxygenase, glucose oxidase, methylamine dehydrogenase all involve hydrogen tunneling. It's not rare, it's common. Enzymes have evolved to use tunneling, and this allows biochemistry to happen at the speeds necessary for life. Without tunneling, enzymes would be too slow, metabolism would be too slow, life would be impossible. Now let me talk about DNA. The structure of DNA, the famous double helix, is held together by hydrogen bonds between base pairs. Adenine pairs with thymine, guanine pairs with cytosine. These hydrogen bonds are crucial. They hold the two strands together, and they determine the genetic code. But hydrogen bonds involve protons, and protons can tunnel. This has implications for mutations. Normally, adenine bonds with thymine, guanine with cytosine, but protons in the hydrogen bonds can tunnel to different positions. Tautomerization. A proton tunnels from one nitrogen atom to another. This changes the bonding properties of the base. Now, adenine might bond with cytosine instead of thymine, or guanine with thymine. This causes a mismatch. And if DNA replicates while the bases are in these rare tautomeric forms, a mutation occurs. The wrong base is inserted. This is spontaneous mutation, and it's driven by proton tunneling. Without tunneling, these tautomeric forms would be much rarer. Thermal fluctuations alone wouldn't be enough to populate them, but with tunneling, protons occasionally hop to the wrong position, and mutations occur. Now, mutations sound bad, and often they are. But mutations are also the source of genetic variation, the raw material for evolution. Without mutations, there's no evolution, no adaptation, no diversity. Life would be static, stuck, unable to evolve. Quantum tunneling in DNA provides a source of mutations, random, spontaneous, unpredictable, and this drives evolution. Life's ability to adapt to changing environments depends on mutations, and mutations depend, in part, on quantum tunneling. Let me tell you about respiration. Cellular respiration is how your cells generate energy. It involves the electron transport chain. A series of protein complexes in mitochondria. Electrons are passed from one complex to another. Each transfer releases energy used to pump protons across a membrane, creating a gradient. The gradient drives ATP synthesis. The energy currency of the cell, the electron transfers in the respiratory chain involve tunneling. Electrons tunnel through proteins from one metal center to another. The distances are often too large for classical electron transfer. The barriers are too high. But quantum mechanically, electrons tunnel, and the transfers happen rapidly enough to sustain respiration. If electrons couldn't tunnel, respiration would be too slow. Energy production would fail. Cells would die, you would die. Tunneling is essential for every breath you take. Now, let me talk about olfaction. How you smell. This is controversial but fascinating. The traditional theory of smell is shape-based. Odorant molecules bind to receptors in your nose. The shape of the molecule determines which receptor it binds to. Different shapes, different smells. But there's an alternative theory, the vibration theory of olfaction. Proposed by Luca Turin, the idea is that smell receptors detect the vibrational frequencies of molecules, not just their shape. But how? Through inelastic electron tunneling. An electron tunnels through the odorant molecule. If the electron's energy matches a vibrational mode of the molecule, the tunneling is enhanced. The receptor detects this and signals a smell. This theory is disputed, but experiments show isotope effects in smell. Deuterated molecules, where hydrogen is replaced by deuterium, smell different, even though their shape is nearly identical. The vibration theory predicts this. Deuterated molecules have different vibrational frequencies. Heavier atoms vibrate slower. If smell depends on tunneling coupled to vibrations, deuterated molecules should smell different. And they do, sometimes. The evidence is mixed, but it suggests that tunneling might play a role in olfaction. If true, every time you smell something, quantum mechanics is involved. Electrons tunneling through molecules in your nose. Let me tell you about vision, how you see light. Photons hit rhodopsin, a protein in your retina. The photon excites an electron in retinal, a molecule bound to rhodopsin. The electron transitions to a higher energy state. This triggers a conformational change in retinal. It changes shape. This change is called photoisomerization, and it happens incredibly fast, within 200 femtoseconds, faster than molecular vibrations. How can a molecule change shape so fast? Tunneling. The proton movements involved in the isomerization may involve quantum tunneling. Allowing the shape change to occur on timescales faster than classical mechanics would allow, without tunneling, vision might be slower, less efficient, less sensitive, quantum mechanics in your eyes. Every time you see. Now let me address the broader question. Is life fundamentally quantum, or is quantum mechanics just a detail? An effect at the molecular level that averages out at larger scales? This is debated. Some scientists argue that life is fundamentally classical, that quantum effects are just chemical details, important but not fundamental. Others argue that life exploits quantum mechanics in essential ways. That evolution has discovered quantum tricks, tunneling, coherence, entanglement, and uses them to achieve efficiencies impossible classically. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Life doesn't require quantum mechanics in the sense that classical systems can be alive. Simple replicating systems, maybe. But complex, efficient, Fast biochemistry as we know it requires quantum effects. Tunneling especially. Without tunneling, biochemistry would be too slow, too inefficient. The complexity of life would be impossible. So while life might not be fundamentally quantum in some deep sense, it is quantum in practice. The biochemical machinery of life is quantum machinery, evolved to exploit quantum mechanics, and this is remarkable. Evolution, a blind process, has discovered quantum mechanics without understanding it, without knowing the Schrödinger equation, just by trial and error. Mutations that enhanced tunneling were selected. Enzymes that optimized barrier shapes were favored. The result is biochemistry that operates at the quantum level efficiently, rapidly, precisely. Let me address a common misconception. Quantum tunneling is not magic. It's not particles teleporting. It's not violating conservation laws. Tunneling is a consequence of the wave function. The wave function extends into classically forbidden regions, and there's a non-zero probability of finding the particle there. When you measure, you sometimes find it on the other side of the barrier. This is allowed by quantum mechanics. Governed by the Schrödinger equation, entirely consistent with conservation of energy and momentum. The particle borrows energy to get through the barrier? No. That's a misleading way to think about it. The energy is uncertain during the tunneling process. The uncertainty principle allows temporary energy fluctuations, but on average, energy is conserved. The particle emerges with the same energy it had before. Tunneling doesn't create or destroy energy. It just allows particles to be in places classical physics forbids. And this is essential for life. Now, let me talk about the future. Quantum biology is a growing field. Scientists are discovering more roles for quantum mechanics in biology. Not just tunneling, but also quantum coherence. The idea that quantum superpositions can persist in biological systems long enough to be functional. In photosynthesis, energy transfer involves quantum coherence. Multiple pathways explored simultaneously. The system finds the most efficient route, quantum mechanically. This enhances efficiency beyond what classical systems could achieve. In bird navigation, birds might use quantum entanglement in their eyes to detect Earth's magnetic field. Radical pair mechanism. Chemical reactions produce entangled electron pairs. The magnetic field affects these pairs, and the bird detects the difference. This is speculative, but experiments show birds lose navigation ability when certain wavelengths of light are blocked. Consistent with the quantum model, in microtubules, structures inside cells, some scientists propose quantum effects might be involved in consciousness. This is highly controversial. Penrose Hameroff orchestrated objective reduction. The idea that quantum coherence in microtubules collapses in a way that produces conscious experience. Most neuroscientists are skeptical, but it's an active area of research. Quantum biology is revealing that life and quantum mechanics are deeply connected. Life is not just chemistry, it's quantum chemistry. And understanding life fully requires understanding quantum mechanics. After 50 years of studying quantum mechanics, I find it remarkable that this abstract, counterintuitive theory describes not just atoms and particles, but also the machinery of life. Tunneling, superposition, coherence. These are not just laboratory curiosities. They're essential features of biology. They make life possible. They make you possible. Let me end with this. You are a quantum being, not in a mystical sense, in a literal physical sense. Every second, trillions of electrons and protons in your body are tunneling through barriers. In enzymes, in mitochondria, in DNA. Your metabolism depends on it, your vision depends on it, your genetic code depends on it. Without quantum tunneling, you could not think. You could not move, you could not live. The classical world is an approximation, a useful one at large scales. But at the molecular level, where life happens, quantum mechanics is in control. And tunneling is one of the key quantum effects that makes life work. It allows reactions to happen fast enough, efficiently enough, precisely enough. It's not magic, it's quantum mechanics, and it's essential. Thank you for watching. Now you know why quantum tunneling makes life possible. Welcome to quantum biology.